Good afternoon, everyone. I have a few more folks coming in. I know the elevators get a little bit congested. I want to thank you for coming out in the rain today and for joining us for a really full morning session. I think that we can all say of all the different disciplines that were represented this morning, there was a little bit for everyone to learn. So this afternoon, I'm going to moderate the Impacted Voices panel. And I just want to give you a little bit of background about the panel. NNSC's Group Violence Intervention, known as GVI, takes a unique approach to reducing group-related violence and keeping group members alive and out of prison. GVI brings together a partnership of law enforcement, community members, and social service providers to guide the intervention based on frontline knowledge and real-time data on violence and the people who face the highest risk. The Impacted Voices project at NNSC aims to amplify the voices of people most directly impacted by group violence, either as service providers or participants in call-ins, and people who are passionate about keeping people and their communities alive and free. And I think I want to talk a little bit about a point that David brought up this morning and something that Reagan Cunningham talked about in her plenary, which is we see the data and we see the research that says certain models or methods are effective. And as Reagan stated, those data points represent people. And so when we say this intervention is effective or this method is effective, what we are really saying is more people are alive and more people are free. And it's about time that we invite those people to tell their stories of escaping violence, of bringing non-law enforcement initiatives to their communities that make them safer and keep them free. And with that said, I would like to turn your attention to the screen over here, and we'll play a short clip from some of the interviews that we conducted. I am the supervisor for the Group Violence Intervention for the City of South Bend. I am the supervisor for the Group Violence Intervention for the City of South Bend and Gary, Indiana.
Faith-based coordinator for Ceasefire.
And I'm the president and CEO of Goodwill Industries in Michiana.
I'm the associate director for South Bend Heritage Foundation and community organizer.
I'm the sergeant of the Chicago Police Department.
I started doing Ceasefire Detroit December 2015.
Manager of Jacksonville Violent Reduction Strategy, the GVI for Jacksonville, and I'm the manager of outreach and support.
All my life I worked in the neighborhood. And working in the neighborhood, you see all kinds of problems, social concerns, issues, and barriers that affect the neighborhood.
My mom moved us from Chicago back in the 70s to Detroit, trying to get my older brothers away from the gang life.
I was in gangs in New York, and someone put a hit on my life to kill me, and I escaped New York.
Even with that move to Detroit, my younger brother was shot and killed, 2 brothers who are incarcerated, ton of nephews who are also incarcerated.
I have a felony. I was charged with murder, voluntary manslaughter, and I did 10 years in Mississippi City Prison.
We needed something that could help stop some of the murders in South Bend, Indiana.
I just felt like we should be a part of the solution.
When we got the call and asked if we would be the lead social service agency for working with GVI, it was a very quick yes.
And I got involved with GVI a few years ago when we first started. They selected a number of people to go to visit John J. Collins School of Criminal Justice.
Coming home, I was given the opportunity to become a supervisor, general manager, and when they thought about doing GVI South Bend, they asked me to come over and oversee it.
We have a lot of policemen who are believing in this program. They actually mean to do good, and they actually want that trust, but just don't know how to actually go about doing it. This gives us that area.
My role, along with my team, is to make the guys feel comfortable. Let them know, this is not a setup. You're going home.
You didn't come here to get locked up. We came here to share some information that you need to know.
With the call-ins, I do think what I really appreciate about them is the fact that they definitely do send the message.
I think the message that it delivers, we will help you if you allow us, but we will stop you if you make us.
I am between the hope and the hammer. We do law enforcement first in our call-in, and then I am the scale that switches from the hammer to the hope.
It's with compassion. If it had been all enforcement, I wouldn't have been able to deal with it. I wouldn't have dealt with it. I wouldn't have wanted to. But because it was community and the minister is there and the group of people that are assembly, that's what makes it more compassionate.
I can see the difference on several different plateaus.
We see a difference because these same folks, they're not reoffending. They're not having the same contact that they were maybe previously having with law enforcement.
We have better working relationships with police officers. When they come in here, they smile.
And who would ever be able to say you look up in a police officer and somebody that was involved in the gang or sitting there having conversations with their friends now? It's about community building and relationships.
It's showing, if we're looking at our stats, you're seeing that the violence is dropping.
Well, I believe that for the last 2 or 3 years, Detroit has boasted of some of the lower numbers in homicides over the last 50 years. I rode here with Isaac. He was telling me how the year before they had 33 murders, I think he said, and last year they only had 9.
And John Jay and the National Network has played a significant role in changing the environment and the way we operate within the city of South Bend.
The individuals that I get to meet and I get to hear their stories, that how their life has changed. That's why I am so glad that we're a part of this, and I can't see us not being a part of it.
Thank you. And thank you to all the people who are in the room who participated in those videos. I'd now like to welcome our panelists to the stage. Mr. Garland Scott, Support and Outreach Manager from the Sheriff's Office in Jacksonville, Florida. Ms. Gladys Muhammed, Associate Director of South Bend Heritage Foundation. Please. Quincy Smith, Community Organizer, Ceasefire Detroit. Isaac Hunt Jr., Group Violence Intervention Supervisor, Goodwill Industries of Michiana. And Ms. Sheryl Jones, Director of the Detroit Youth Violence Prevention Initiative. Welcome, all of you. So I just gave a little bit of an introduction, but I would like to ask our panelists to expound on who they are and what they do. So why don't we start with you? You can use this.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Isaac Hunt. Back in the early 80s, I was going to say 1990, early 80s, I was involved in gangs and guns, helped start a gang in the city of South Bend called Dog Life, which was affiliated of Vice Lords. And a lot of it is because I couldn't read. I didn't understand what was going on with me. I found out I was dyslexic. I did graduate now, right? But through that portion of my life, I didn't know who I was. So I helped tear up my community, and I served in the Army, and I came home on for leave from the service and shot somebody, and the next thing I know, I was in 10 years in the penitentiary. And when I left, my daughter was 2, and I was holding her in my arms. And when I came home, she was hugging me around the waist. And you talk about an experience of sitting in a maximum security prison where you have never really been in trouble before with the law. You have done criminal activity, you just didn't get caught. To coming home to where you feel like you've been dropped off and out of space, to where you don't even know I work a gas pump. I had never seen a cell phone or a debit card. And to have people that come and mentor you from the time you walk out the door has really changed my thought process. But it also showed me that the work could be done. To go from penitentiary to being the general manager of an aluminum extrusion factory with a budget of $2.5 million and 326 employees and 16 supervisors, starting a charter school, being a part of the 100 Black Men, and then getting the opportunity to be able to work at Goodwill to give the same thing back that somebody gave me. Right? As soon as I came home, there was a gentleman by the name Lynn Coleman. He literally gave me my first suit and wrote me some business cards, and I didn't even have a job. And I've been wearing a suit every day because somebody spoke into my life. So as part of the 100 Black Men, we always say what they'll see is what they'll be. And this is what GVI is about. How can you speak love into people to provide a service and be honest with them? So that's a little bit about me, and I'll move on and let somebody else.
My name is Gladys Muhammed. I'm from South Bend, Indiana. And I'm a community organizer. Years ago in 1988, I began to work for an organization called South Bend Heritage Foundation. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. I was hired to help clean up a neighborhood on the west side of South Bend, Indiana. It was a neighborhood that had been disinvested in by the banks. The senior citizens, the people had gotten old, and they had lived there for years and years on fixed incomes. And the city of South Bend would not help clean up the neighborhood. It was like something that you see in Detroit. There was a show that used to come on TV called The Corner. And that's what the block was. We called it the block. The people from Ben Harbor, Detroit, and Gary, Chicago would come to the block and sell stuff out your houses. And they would do things, and nobody would help clean up that neighborhood, and I was hired to help clean it up. When we first started cleaning up the neighborhood, they said, leave it there. Leave it on the west side in the black neighborhood. It shouldn't go anyplace else. And in 1 month, we had 11 murders. We had 5 on one street and 6 on the next street. And they would go to the one on the block and die. They get shot someplace else and then go down there and die. And we said, that's enough. We're going to clean this neighborhood up. And we, over a period of years, we successfully cleaned up the neighborhood. And we said, they can go in your neighborhood. They're going to get the hell off this neighborhood. But they're going away from here. They can go in your neighborhood, and when they come in your neighborhood, you clean it up. And that's how I first got started helping to clean up the neighborhood. A few years ago, I met David Kennedy, and they brought us to here to look at the group violence intervention. I was one who doubted it. I know the police in South Bend. I like some of them I don't like. But I came here and I listened to everything. They did the spiel. And so I said, okay, it seemed like a strategy that works. I'm willing to do it if it's going to work. But my big question was, if we do this, if we clean up the neighborhood, if we get rid of the crime, is some of the money that the city of South Bend got going to come in my neighborhood and take care of some of the issues that's in my neighborhood? But over the years, I've been with the GVI, and it works. The call-ins is held in my center. And I'm going to stop talking right now so somebody else can talk, okay?
You guys can take the mics over there.
Oh, he got some mics, okay.
Hello, I'm Garland Scott. Is it on? My name is Garland Scott. I'm a native of New York. I'm a New Yorker. And in 1985, I was involved with, we call them posses here. It's not really big gangs here. I was in the Flatbush section, and I was pretty bad guy. My name was Big Buck because I didn't give you know the rest. And I was the one that went to collect if you didn't pay your crack bill. Well, and here's the real flip to it. My mother was a police officer at the 76th Precinct. She didn't know what I was doing until somebody put a number on my head. It was a lot back then. It was $5,000, and I thought it was a game until they killed one of my friends. And I had to go tell my mother that she got a thug living in the house with her. So they got me expedited to a little town. I had relatives in Florida I didn't know about, Georgia. And I went there and hid out for a while, but the adage is true that you can take a person out of the city, but the city is hard to get out of the person. And I struggled for a while in church. Wasn't pretty much accepted because I was, if you see me then, it was kind of horrible, you know, big muscle-bound guy with combat boots, old Larry Bird socks, and driving a Harley Davidson. And, it didn't work out, so I played around for a while, and I went to visit somebody back here in Brooklyn. When I came here to visit the person, he was one of my guys in the streets, and I wouldn't let him know I was somewhat in church. I didn't let him know I was doing good. Back then, that's a punk, you're scared. So I left, and I went back to Florida, and I kept thinking about him. When I got home, I called my brother, because there was no cell phones. He said, "Hey, you heard what happened?" I said, "No." He said, "They bust 7 caps in him. He's dead. He wouldn't tell where you was at, so he's dead." Something snapped in me, and I've been chasing that guy now for 30 years. So his name's Junior. I did it pretty good. That I stirred up a lot of stuff in the city of Jacksonville. So I put a sign out, wanted, crackheads, liars, prostitutes, child, everything I can think I put on the sign, welcome. And it grew. So they started putting me on TV shows and Christian shows, and caught the attention of George W. Bush in 2002. And he asked me would I come on board with his administration and work the faith-based initiative for capital compassionate grants, and I became the reintegration guy for the United States. And I left after 5 years, came home, got burnt out, because you will get burnt out from this. And my baby boy got in trouble, facing 38 years. So I opened up a program called the Noah's Ark Project that helped young guys that's in trouble. It's a 50-bed facility, and working with the sheriff for 3-4 decades. The last one said, "Hey, could you come on board? You're Switzerland. Everybody know you. You can help us with this GVI." And I started working with it, and we're having a lot of success. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for an opportunity, and my colleagues, some of them I know them, and thank you. We couldn't do it without you guys.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheryl Jones. Can you hear me? This is a really good mic.
We don't have monitors.
Oh, okay. I'm the director of Detroit Youth Violence Prevention Initiative. I came to Detroit Violence Prevention Initiative as an educator. I was the director of social studies for Detroit Public Schools. I actually was recruited out of the school district, retired, so that I could take on this position. Had been eligible for retirement for a couple of years and was just really looking for the right opportunity. Wasn't ready to sit down yet. In the back of my mind, I wanted an easier way of life, I didn't find it here, but I'm working. My motivation came from as a brand new school teacher. I was put into a 6th grade classroom. I was put into the 6th grade classroom as a brand new school teacher. I've worked, from pre-K through 12th grade in district programs as well. But my first assignment came right after Christmas. The teacher retired, and he didn't tell the class. So when I came in, the kids were angry. They were like, "Who are you, and we don't want you." And I had in mind ever since I was a kid that when I become a teacher, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Not all the boring things that used to kill me in the classroom. I was the kid who would sleep during class and wake up in time to do the assignment and get an A on it. So I decided I was going to be a different kind of teacher, and I was. The kids didn't like it. So they basically tormented me. There were a few in particular that I had nightmares about. One was Michael. Michael was the toughest 6th grader you ever want to see. I watched him beat a kid's head in the wall one day. He punched somebody out rather than say anything to him. Another one was Toriana. Michael was like one of 9 kids, so he was the oldest of the 9. So I could imagine what may have been happening in his house. Toriana, she was the meanest little girl I ever saw. Pretty as she could be, but she just really detested me. Her mother worked the street in front of the school. She was, one of the ladies, in front of the school. And she'd go home sometimes and couldn't get in the house. She would have to take the air conditioner out to get in the house. And we're talking about a 12-year-old, right? So that was Toriana. And the other one was Javon. Javon was a foster child who had come from a home where the family were into the drug business, and he had been back and forth in and out of foster care system. Very hyperactive, couldn't sit down, really the smartest kid in the class, but the most annoying. But those kids are the ones that set me on the path to how can I make a difference. I watched Javon get disciplined. Now later I realized it was just a reaction, a response to trauma that he was experiencing. He couldn't stand to see, you know, sweet kid, but he was obnoxious. Michael, I made him my friend, had him do, you know, made him the helper, the leader. So Michael began to discipline my class for me. So if I say, may I have your attention, please? He'd turn around and say, okay, everybody, shut up. And they would, you know. Toriana, she never got right with me. Her father took her at the end of that school year. She came back the next year just to tell me that, Miss Jones, I didn't hate you. I really didn't. I was going through some things. But all that to say is that that lit in me a passion for helping kids who are being left behind. Those are those few that drive the violence, those few traumatized kids. Michael and Javon, they have been in and out of prison probably all of their adult lives, you know, as I kind of halfway keep track of people. But they didn't have programs like we have. So that's really why I do the work, is to help those kids.
Good stuff. Hey, everybody. Quincy Smith, community organizer, City of Detroit. Really excited to be here. So for me, I mean, everybody's experience is different. You know, for me, it's not what I went through, but what I saw growing up. My pops, he started a church on the east side of Detroit back in the early 80s. And as most urban cities, a lot of drug activity, a lot of dope boys, right? I remember times, you know, after service, and you would hear gunshots, you know, sitting in church, and you get outside and you see a dead body laying in the street. So we were literally in the middle of a war zone during that time. My dad always had a real passion for his community. And so a lot of his efforts and a lot of the outreach work that he did was to serve those individuals. In 96, he did a gang summit, right, where he brought in one of the leaders of the Crips gang. And you know, we went to a school earlier that day. He took a team, talked to the kids, invited everybody out to the church that evening. You know, had a good time. Kids were excited. Come that evening, the church is packed. Dad's getting ready to, you know, bring up the keynote speaker, this leader of the Crips gang, and he's not in the room. I look out the window and I see him literally on the corner with a bunch of gang members talking to them outside. And his message was, eventually he came in, but eventually his message was, this is where we need to be. These guys are not walking into your church. They're not coming in here to hear your message. We have to take this message of love and hope to where they are. And that has such a profound impact on me. Every job I've ever had has been working with that population and serving young people, except for my first job, I was selling shoes. But after that, in the schools, and, you know, had a great opportunity through Ray Winans out of D-Live from church out of Detroit. Some of you may know him. Really brought me on in this capacity, and I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for sharing your motivations for doing this work and a little bit more so that the audience can understand your perspectives. So the theme of this year's conference, the emerging science of violence prevention, embraces approaches that not too long ago would not have been included in more sort of scholarly and law enforcement-centered discussions around crime prevention. These initiatives include like street corner resources. I don't know if anybody is from New York and has heard of street corner resources. The peer network that focuses on peer mentoring and assistance for opioid addicted populations. As well as other grassroots and service organizations across the country who've identified and refined ways to reduce crime in their communities through non-law enforcement approaches. So how would, this is for any of you here, as you all have different backgrounds and you do slightly different types of work, how would you describe the move to have more community participation in stopping the violence in your neighborhoods?
Test one. Is this on? All right. I think for me, it's being intentional about where you go, and bringing street exposure, right? You know, there's a lot of guys, kind of, you know, to what I said in my introduction, you know, you hosting a program or having something that, you know, services, you know, the population that you're trying to serve, a lot of guys aren't coming to that. You know what I mean? You literally have to be intentional about where you take this message. And so kind of like the street corner concept, you know, we do these things called street engagements. We're going to where these hot spots are. We're taking that message of hope on the street. Like if we know where a shooting just happened, right? Or we know that a bunch of gang members are hanging out at this specific gas station or liquor store, that's where we want to be, right? And so we're not just going empty-handed, but we're going there with something to give, right? And you know, earlier they talked about that low-hanging fruit. We want to be able to offer something right away, right there on the spot. What exactly is it that you need that's going to get you to put that gun down and come with us, to rock with us? What is it going to take? And it could be something as simple as food, something simple as pay my gas bill, pay my phone bill, whatever it may be. We try to meet that need immediately. Once you do that, that's instant credibility. They're taking that to their friends and saying, listen, this is what they did for me, right? And that message begins to go out into the community, and you really develop street credibility that way.
What we did is we're a little different in Jacksonville, Florida, because demographics. It's the largest city landmass in the United States of America, 856 square miles. Because I was that population, my concepts and philosophies are a little different. I knew that when I was in trouble, time was of essence to me, that I had to get what I needed right away. So when they asked me to be a part, I told them I needed about a month. And what I did was I went out to community leaders and organizations and different agencies that I knew that they were going to need. I went to Department of Motor Vehicle. I went to child support agencies. I went to local trade schools. I went to colleges, and I just didn't go there to ask them for help. I asked them for a targeted person that we would have a quick access to at a moment of minutes that I can access somebody for the help. I went to, in Jacksonville, we have Kids Hope Alliance that supplies kids for, you know, things for kids, food stamps and all those things like that. So once I secured it, when I went to a custom or out in the street, we were able to get services. I went to the employers, the potential employers, and I told them my guy's going to be high. You know, they're not passing no drug tests. So can you give them 30 days? Don't let my guys come up there and you turn them around. 30 days firing them if they're not clean. So once I got all of that established, it took one or two times. A guy came and we went to his house, a shooter, and he wanted to be a Tulsa welder. So I got on the phone sitting in his living room and said, hey, I got a guy. They said, well, who is this? I said, Safe Passage. That's my code word. Come down. And hour and a half, he was signed up for Tulsa welding school. The word went out, so now other agencies wanted to be a part. So we can't have street corners. We don't have no street corners in too many areas, except in the city area. So I think it's essential. Don't go out there trying to help somebody and cannot supply the needs, because it's going to implode on you. They're going to go back and tell everybody, you ain't no good, you're a piece of whatever. So thank God, because of my relationship with the agencies, I got a long track record. And another thing I do with these agencies, I never tell my participants I'm going to help them do anything. That's a word that's not in my vocabulary. I'm going to assist you, okay? Because if you talk about help, these guys will lay back and wait for you to do it and then just be sorry.
Thank you. Okay. When is this one working? Yes. Okay, cool. Okay. In the neighborhood where I work at, it's an active process to go and bring people and get them involved in an issue or a concern that they have in their community. And I have been doing that for years. So when I say it's a meeting, people come. And if they don't come, I go out and get them. I go where they're at, and I tell them this is your neighborhood. This is where you live. If you don't care about it, who you think gonna care about it? This is our problem. This is our solution, and we have to be at the table. I work with the brass roots and the grassroots. I need to work with the grassroots because when we need to cut through a chase or knock down a barrier, I need to know who they are. I don't want to talk to their secretaries. I need to talk to the person that's making the decision about what's going to happen in the neighborhood. And where we have our call-ins at is called the Charles Martin Youth Center. And the reason I'm telling you about the Charles Martin Center is that it was a funky old dirty-ass hardware store that had been empty for years. And we looked at that building and he said, we don't have a youth center in this neighborhood. It had been empty for 16 years. And we raised the money and renovated that building, and we named it after a man named Charles Martin, who had dedicated a black man named Charles Martin, who had dedicated his entire life into saving the lives of young people in our community. And that's the story that we tell when we have our call-ins, to let them know if we can renovate this funky old building and turn it into a space that's useful for people to come in and to feel welcome, to be dignified and respectable, then that's the space we have our call-in in, so that the people who come to the call-in, the people on probation, can understand that if we can renovate this building and if we can change your lives can be changed too. And you're welcome in this space. This is a space that you're going to be respected in and dignified in, and I'm the community voice. The law enforcement is there, and they heavy on the law enforcement. But the balance is there, and when you come to that space in that center, we're there to smile at you, to say, we're going to talk to you about a difficult subject. But at the same time that we're sharing with you the difficult parts of life, like this young man said, one of y'all said, we're going to help you if you let us, but we're going to stop you if you make us. That's the real message, but we have to give it to them in a balanced, caring way. So we smile at them, and we say, we need you to help us. Yeah. Help yourself. Yeah. If you let us help you, you're helping us clean up the neighborhood if you can help yourself. And that is the message that the community gives to these people. They're our people. They're not these people. They our people. And that's another thing. They're our people. And one day it'll come and meet you at your door. These senseless murders that our kids end up doing. And they are kids. They're black on black crime, a lot of it. We live in a society where we have grown up to self-destruct. And they have to understand that they are part of the problem and they shooting each other. And if it's going to change, we have to learn to care about our people. So the message that I give during the call-in is the message of caring, the message of hope. If we can change this building, then you can change your life. And I'm going to stop again.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Sheryl?
In addition to our ceasefire efforts, street engagement, Quincy talked to you about, we also look at what gaps are there in the community. We don't want to duplicate or replicate what someone else is already doing well. So we listen to the community. What is it? What are the barriers? Partners come to us, community people come to us and give us ideas of these are challenges. For instance, one of our newer programs is Drive to Thrive. The police department shared with us that most Detroiters don't have driver's licenses. And it's a pathway to prison because they're driving anyway. Motor City, you're driving. We don't have good mass transportation. If you want to get there, you better have a car. So they do. However they get them, they don't have good plates, they don't have licenses. So if they cross the city border, they're going to get in trouble. And they might get in trouble in the city, but it's pretty clear that you're going to get in trouble where the jobs actually are. So with these tickets they collect, they don't pay them, they miss the court days, on and on and on. Next thing you know, they are not eligible for work. They have criminal backgrounds. And so with that path, so we have a driver's ed program that we put in the schools that have the most impoverished schools, the communities with the most violence, and those are where we have our programs. We have driver's ed, and we include safety and violence prevention with them. We have a couple of new mentoring programs. The Brotherhood. Quincy is very involved in the Brotherhood, mentoring young men, boys in the community who are saying, help, we live this way, but we don't know another way. So we're going into the community, finding those boys, and we've also put those programs in the schools, and we're doing it again with the girls. And we have a middle school program. So those are some of the things we do in terms of reaching out and working with the community.
Thank you, Sheryl. So I noticed that a couple of you referred to the call-ins that are a part, an element of GVI. And for those in the audience who are unfamiliar with NNSC's approach to violence prevention, a call-in is a meeting during which a coalition of law enforcement, community members, and social service providers delivers the GVI messaging to participants who but identify as members of a fluent, violent group that drives violence in the community. The strategy entails other methods of notification, but in call-in, it's traditional communication mechanism. As Gladys mentioned, it's a message of, yes, enforcement, but also we care about you. And so it's usually held in a place of civic importance, like the Charles Martin Center, perhaps a church, but it usually lasts about an hour. Of our audience members, by show of hands, who has attended a call-in? Wow, that's quite a lot. And the panel, now I know several of you have participated in call-ins. If you could describe for me your impression of the call-in, how it informed your understanding of what the intervention was supposed to do, but also how it impacted you as a person.
When I first seen the call-in, it was in Chattanooga, Tennessee with Paul Smith. And I came down to Chattanooga and was real skeptical, because the first thing I started thinking, I'm not finna help you bring no paddy whacking in my neighborhood and lock up brown and black men. At the end of the day, we'll do whatever we got to do, but I'm not finna help you do it. But when I got down there and I met Paul, and I sat in on the call-in, and the first part that I heard was, we got this many tickets, we took this many drugs, and we arrested this many people, and this person is connected to this person. I was like, oh, heck no. And I mean, it was hard enforcement. And then I heard a mother get up there and talk about how her son was killed and how she was still impacted by this and the trauma that she was still going through after 8 years. And then they brought a gentleman up who had been through where I had been at, a voice of redemption, who had changed their life and was a role model and was debunking all of the myths that you can do time on your head and all this type of stuff, and telling the truth about how many nights he sat there and cried in penitentiary and missing his mother. And then it was the voice of help. And it was somebody the guy who was just like, you know what? And it was Paul. Paul was just like, whatever you need, we're going to help you. We'll help you. We'll help your girlfriend. We're going to help your mother. It's almost like a rap song. I was like, that's what I want to do, right? I want to be the carrot and not the stick. And I got a chance with my CEO to allow me to be able to be the head of this and be creative, to be able to develop and do different stuff. I got a chance. You only get one shot at this. When you go into these streets and you talking to these young men, you got to come real. Game recognize game. They know if you're playing or not, right? I call it social service game banging, because social services has been lagging behind for years, right? Where was the social service when I was going through school to prison pipeline and I didn't know how to read, right? It's easy to get that low-hanging fruit when you're walking in the door. But when they sitting in them seats and you got every law enforcement officer that you can think of, and you got the community behind them, and then you got this other portion where they offering help and they telling their stories and stuff. And these guys are sitting there with like deers in headlights. The only thing they want this to do is be over and let me out. How do you impact that person at that moment at a call-in to get them to change, to be able to ask for service, to build a relationship with them? You can't talk at them. They've been talked at for years. You got to talk through them. And that's what I seen the call-in done. It allowed people to talk through the individuals, to help the individuals to be the messenger in the community. And I said, you know what? This works. So we kept working with it and working with it. And because the community kept saying, it's too heavy on enforcement. There's not enough on help. All we hear is enforcement. So we softened it up a little bit. Then we try something different. And now we at the point now where we feel we at the right stage of how we do our call-ins. It's an even balance. It's more help than we gonna hit you in the head and lock you up and give you 106 years, right? It's more of you want to go to school, we go get you in school. We got the Excel High School. You need child support, we're gonna help you with child support. We got local businesses sitting here right here in this call-in that's going to give you a job if you go talk to them. We're not gonna walk you to them, but you gotta talk to people to find out that Elkhart Plastic is here, that Nylon Craft is sitting right here. And when you talk to them, they're gonna give you an interview guaranteed. That's what it's about. And that's why I love the call-ins. You know, it is only 10% of the work. It's 10% of everything else. But everybody see the call-in and think it's 100%. It's 10% of the work. We really actors on the stage. The real work is when you're out there doing customs and doing miniature call-ins on the corner, right? So my office is my car, right? And my conference room is the corner. And that's where we get the work done at.
For me, when I first heard of the call-ins and I came here, the only reason I participated is because they said the process works. Because I felt like Isaac. I felt like I ain't getting ready to help them lock up another black man, guilty or not guilty. Now, that's how I felt, because that's what I saw, and that's how I felt. But I decided, okay, I'm sick of black men dying. I'm sick of people dying in the streets. And I said, okay, I'm going to try this, and we're going to see if the process works. And we softened it up because it was real heavy on the law enforcement side. But after we would have a call-in, we would go in the room and talk about it. And we would say, okay, this worked, this didn't work. And one of the things that bothered me was that every time we had a call-in, it was all black men. So I said, is anybody else on probation? I mean, we needed to know that. That's when you get a real look at the criminal justice center. It would hurt me and I would cry. And then they brought a few Latinos. So then I said, okay, is any white men in the justice system, in the probation? So then they kind of fixed it up a little bit, because that would bother me. And it would bother other people. They would tell me, but they wouldn't tell the police department. But we sat in there and we worked it out. But here, I know that it works because I experienced it myself one day. In January, okay, I've been to a lot of funerals, other people's funerals, people that I don't know because I work in the community. But sooner or later, it'll come home to you. I didn't know that it was going to come to my door. And in January of this year, my nephew was 16 years old, worked at Little Caesars. And my son worked next door at a place called a Linden Grill. And my son would get off at 7:30. My nephew would get off at 6:30. And I was going to pick up my son one day, and my grandson ran in the house and said, Adrian got shot. And I said, Adrian who? And he said, Granny, Adrian. And so I went on to pick up my son because he worked right next door to him. And when I got there, my grandson called again. And so I called Isaac. Isaac is on the GVI. I called Isaac. I said, Isaac, did somebody get shot on the west side? And he said a young man got shot, 16 years old. He called the police, and they responded immediately. And he said, and Gladys, calm down because I don't think he's going to make it. He said on the corner of Brookfield and Fosnut, which is exactly where he lives. I went to pick up my son, and I said to him, Adrian got shot. And he said he couldn't have. He said, I just gave him a cheeseburger. He gave me a pizza, and I gave him a cheeseburger. My nephew had a 3.7 average. He played football, he played basketball, and he worked at the Pizza Hut. He was a good boy. But when he got off from work, when he went home, it was as Isaac said, it was a direct hit. When he got out of his car, got on his steps, they shot him. In the end, it was like a mistaken identity. But here's a young man that I loved. I remembered the day that he told me, "Hey, Gladys, look at my grades." His report card, he had 6 A's and a B+. And I said to him, I said, "Adrian, that's not your report card. You do it there on the computer." And he said, "No, Granny. No, and Gladys, I did it for real." And I said, "I would give you some money, but I don't have any right now." But and I'm going to speed up a little. I went to the hospital. Isaac said, "Go to the hospital. Don't bother to come to the neighborhood." When I got to the hospital, when I went in the emergency room, the mother and the father, they was in the emergency room. The emergency room, they wasn't letting them upstairs. And I said, "Excuse me, you need to let them go up those steps or get on the elevator because their son is there." And the police officer said to me, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the aunt." And he said, "You can't go up there." I said, "I don't have to go, let them go." And so he kept messing around. And I said, and he said, "You're going to have to move your car to the front of the hospital," which was about 2 blocks. And I said, "That ain't getting ready to happen." I said, "You're going to let them up them steps to see their son before he passed away." So Isaac was outside. He said, "Gladys, let me go outside because there's 40 kids out here, and I don't want the police to mess with them." Then I called a trauma person who's also on the GVI. And when he got downstairs and they saw him, they said, "Okay, y'all all can go upstairs." That's why I'm saying those relationships that you develop with the call-in works. We got upstairs, and he had almost passed away, and they had him on the machines. But they allowed because I was with them and because of the GVI, they allowed them in that room, and they caressed his little body until he passed away, until the machine stopped. But it was love, and I was there with them, and it was 6 of them. She had 6 kids, and they were all up there, and the hospital staff was wonderful because they also are part of the GVI. They allowed them to stay in that room for 45 minutes, and I was thinking they was gonna be really emotionally upset, but they sit there and they loved her son. They caressed him, and what made me impressed so much was that the hospital behaved themselves. They said, "Miss Muhammed, they can stay in here as long as they like." They were nice, they were kind, and they were gentle, and they were warm. And that's what made the difference in the lives of that young man. And I said it was because of the GVI. Had I not been a part of the GVI, I would have had to go to jail too, because I was going to tell them something they didn't want to hear. But I'm saying that the strategy does work, and it's those relationships that you build with the people that are part of the GVI that makes a difference.
What Isaac said, his car is his office. I rode with him a couple of times. Have to move stuff around, his typewriter, his desktop computer, everything's in there in his car. My experience with the custom notifications were little call-ins, thank you, because I'm going to go there, thank you. With the call-ins were a little different. I started phrasing the hammer and the hope. The reason mine was different, and when they got up there and talked about they're going to send you to some God-forsaken place if you commit a crime and you're getting 15 years extra for extra bullet, I started thinking, do I got anything out there right now? This really scared the hell out of me. I was sitting there, and I didn't do nothing wrong. And then when the hope side came up, it was the same thing I always heard all the years. I'm like, come on now. Police officers are, commissioned to do a job. And the balance wasn't right because the hope or the help side was weak. And so in Jacksonville, we had many call-ins, but we start cutting down on the call-ins because the judges in Duval County, that county, they don't like to send violent, people at risk on probation or parole because they think they're going to go out and reoffend. So they lock them up. So we start getting thin. So what we did was we perfected the custom notifications. And what I did with the custom notifications is when I started out, like many of you might start the same way, I was the outreach support manager for the GVI. but I ain't had nobody to manage. You know what I mean? And then the next thing, I'm the manager of the whole thing, so I got 2 roles, and if you're successful in this, you're going to be busy.
Yes.
They're going to start sending you their driver's license. So what I did, I recruited faith-based leaders and community-based leaders to help me in the community. But I had criteria. Just because you say thank you and hallelujah, and I can say that because I'm a senior pastor for 30 years. I'm like, these guys are always late because they don't have to report to nobody. You know what I mean? They just God. They had something, the Spirit led them. And you can't be doing that. I can say that. I'm a senior pastor for 30 years. You know what I mean? They don't follow protocol. And when you out there, they don't want to hear no Jesus piece in this. They don't want to hear Jesus. They want to see Jesus.
Yes.
So you had to ride a minimum of 3 custom notifications with me, and I monitored how you had to act. Then I had to teach you how to do outreach outside of your church, because if I'm going to give you my outreach and support resources, you can't backdoor me and give them to Mother Ferguson and everybody else.
Right.
So once you went through all of those things, we set that up, because you have to listen. What you have to do with this population is the number one killer with everything we're saying, relationship. There's no rehabilitation without a relationship. There's no rebuke without a relationship. You can build something for 15 years, and in 15 minutes you'll kill it because you trusted somebody to help this guy and they didn't show up. I did almost 500 custom notifications. We lost 6 people already that were killed, that it didn't follow through, and I don't want that to happen again. And another thing I want to say on behalf of the panel, we're from different regions, and we learn from each other. We do a lot of peers. It's one big machine. And I've learned this years ago. You know, you don't reinvent the tires, you just change the rims depending on what area you at, and you make it work for where you at. So our strong points are our custom notifications. We're not weak on call-ins, but because of the system, the justice system set up there, they don't give us a lot of participants for the call-ins.
I would say our call-ins are almost a religious experience. Maybe Bishop Harris is our moderator. wave, Bishop. Wave, Bishop. It's like you have a personal transformation just being in the audience. It's solemn and it's serious, and he repeats that message again. The community is tired of the violence. The violence must stop. With the support of the national network, David, Paul used to come out, Megan, they help us to keep it balanced, because we are a program we're operated out of the police department. So they help us to keep it balanced, and we keep it balanced. Those of us who are community people, who are not law enforcement people, we help keep it balanced. But it's transformational. There's never a call in that I don't end up in tears. You reflect on the stories that the people tell, you know, the mother, the voice of redemption, the hope that there is for that these young men, these 30 or however many we have at that time, that there's hope that they can change. We reflect on the impact of the violence on the community as a whole. And I think that's part of the message that when Bishop does his moderation that you get. I myself, my brother was killed when I was, 11 years old? Group violence in the city. Horrible impact on our family. Crushed my mother. She pretty much was a mental wreck emotional and mental wreck for years following it. My sister, she don't mind me saying, she said, I have her permission to say, she was lost to the streets at that time. Everybody went their own way, and nobody was helped. My father got lost in a bottle, and I was a little kid just there. And I didn't even realize that I had trauma that had not been healed until doing a restorative practices training probably about 6 years ago. And all of that came up with restorative responses to trauma. It's like we have to deal with the victims, and the victims are beyond the person who was shot, the family, the friends, the community. We're all victims, and we have to start with the healing. We have to start with empathy, and I think the call-ins, you can tell that it touches the guys in the audience. They're in tears, so they're finally feeling that what I do is having a bigger impact. And I think that's, the power of the call-in for us.
If I could just add one thing. When we started with our callers, we averaged, like you said, 30 people, 28, 30 people that comes. And after having people ask for services, in the very beginning, we was getting like 5 or 6. We have started getting almost max participation for social services after our call-ins. And 99% of it is because we follow up immediately as soon as the call-in is over. My staff and we're calling people immediately. We do not wait. So when everybody got through eating the chicken and the French fries and all that stuff, and everybody's gone home, my staff is still working at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, calling these guys on the phone. Some of them are calling me on the phone trying to see if it's true or not, see if I'm truly going to answer the phone. Right? And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm answering the phone, and I'm saying, hey, how you doing? I just wanted to hear you, see if you was going to answer or not. Right? So then we always do it on the Thursday. That Friday morning, we call them again. If we don't get them, we go to their house and knock on their door. How can we help you? And since we start doing it that way, we've been starting getting almost max people from all the call-ins.
That's good. So just real quick for me, my first call in, I wasn't working with Ceasefire. I was just an invite, and I had 2 emotions, 2 spectrums of the emotions. Like, it went from fear to hope, like real quick, But for me, the most impactful thing was that many separate entities coming together for one cause. Right? Law enforcement, cool, but the help, right? The service providers, listening to Keith Bennett talk, right? And then introduce all the folks who were there because they care, right, and were there to, really provide tangible resources, right? Seeing that to me, because I've always had the mindset that, it's going to take not one entity, one organization, one community cannot do this work. It's going to literally take all of us together, right, to really make a true impact and a true difference. And that was so resounding to me when I left. That was the biggest thing for me, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. So now that we have had an opportunity to hear about the impact of call-ins and how it personally affected you, and also your impressions of how it affected the participants there, how do you see the impact of the call-ins on your communities? Do the community members express that they feel safer? Do you see a change in the environment where the participants are living or, were involved in group violence?
I'll start off. I'm going to be honest. Isaac kind of touched on it earlier. I do feel like, being a part of the call-ins so many times and seeing it over and over and over again, you do get the sense that it's a show, it's a stage, and folks are you kind of put on a show for the guys. The real work does happen on the street.
Right.
So it is the follow-up. That's what really, really matters. If we do a good enough job on the stage and sharing the story, right? Law enforcement tells their side, and the help and the hope there is real compelling, then we'll get some follow-up. But if we're not providing and really sticking to that promise, all that was for nothing. Yep. It didn't mean anything, right? So I really take pride. I think it lost me. Okay. I really take pride in our team, the outreach team, making sure that we make immediate contact, right? We got a small window.
Yes.
And we try to take advantage of that small window, So I think that's where it's the call-in, the promises that are being made at the call-in, coupled with the follow-up. I think that's what matters.
You know where I see where it's not effective in most communities that's doing this work is where they don't have an outreach team and the social services is not in the community. If you have an outreach team, then your outreach team is your referral source to your social services. But if you don't have one, your social services has to be in the community, building relationships and keeping the promise. But also at the same time, I have 78 social service partners with me in South Bend, Indiana. We are 108,000, about 108,000 city-wide population. But we got universities partnering with us, Notre Dame, Ivy Tech, IUSB, Bethel College. Because one of the things I always look at, and everybody, when I say it this way, people always say, you're really smart. But I'm not that smart. That's why I got the universities partnering with me, right? So I could get interns from the University of Notre Dame who are majoring in math and economics and all this type of stuff to write my proposals, right? And they get a grade for it and I get a product, right? So my outreach team, the Notre Dame students wrote the outreach proposal. But also, getting the Notre Dame students from behind the wall and in relationships with my participants not only changes my participant, it also affects the student. And building the relationship across boundaries that way, because you think just because a student goes to Notre Dame, they're paying all this money that they got it made. No, they're full of trauma too. And so when my guys are sitting there looking at it and they feel like they're not part of the community and they're just left out to the wayside, and we bring these relationships together, it makes them feel that, if you know what, I'm not the only one going through this. How can I come out of this? If she went through this and she had Notre Dame, I could go through this and go to IUSB. Right? And that's where we look at it and we saying, yes, it is affecting our community, because the community is the reason why we have GVI. It's not because of Goodwill. It's not because of Mayor Buttigieg, you know, our new mayor that's running for president and stuff like that, right? It has nothing to do with political. It has nothing to do with enforcement. GVI is the community's initiative. And if you keep your mind focused that I'm holding the heartbeat of my community, you will always do the right thing. You will always have the right conversation. You will always, you know, get out of your bed even more, because it's not about you. It's about the people we serve.
The other thing at our call-ins, there's 100 people that participate every time that they come to the call-ins to sit in to see what it is. So over a period of years, almost the entire community know about the call-ins. They call us now and say, well, when you gonna help, can we come? And out of that, Isaac they always get new partners, people that want to give somebody a job. They come and say, we can help. So it's the entire community. It's bigger than you and I. It's for the community to change the quality of life in our community. And so it does work. And every now and then we see people, they may not have called Isaac, but we see them in the drugstores and places, and they'll say, I saw you at the call-in. And they would be some of the people on probation, and they'll just tell me how they going. And I said, did you call Isaac? They say, no, Miss Muhammad. I said, well, call him then. But they even the people on probation, they are glad that somebody care about them. They're glad that we give that message to care about yourself. If you help us, we're all helping the community at large. And you can see it, you can see their body language. You can see their faces. You can see they change. And you can know when they're listening. So it is working. Now, we don't publicize it. I'm not quite sure why, but we don't. But and it's working. And maybe we shouldn't. But over the years, it is never publicized, but we always got 100 people there. But it is working, and it's quietly working the way that it should work. And what they say, if something is working, don't be messing with it, let it stay. So it's working.
In terms of the call-in, I think one of the major impacts of the call-in is that it builds community. You know, it's only a piece of the puzzle. As Quincy said, you know, you have to have the follow-up. So we need the strong outreach workers who are committed. We need the service providers who are committed that are going to come through. But the call-in breaks the ice. It's the start of something great.
Thank you. I want to open up some time for questions from the audience. I'm going to have our lovely Chelsea here from our Intimate Partner Violence Intervention run the mic around. So,
Renee too. And Renee. And Renee Gray. She's going to help too.
Hi, everyone. Nikki Smith-Key from Arno Ventures. Thank you for sharing your story. Wanted to just follow up on the community question and the importance of collaboration, but the importance of also bringing the community and informing the community of the call-ins. Many of you said you were scared to even go to one. How can we change the narrative and definition of the call-ins for the community to understand the importance that this plays in the community to get more community buy-in?
Honestly, I wouldn't change the narrative because it's supposed to be scary. When you think you're going to Youngstown, North Dakota, you know where that is? I've never heard of Youngstown, North Dakota. What is it, Yankton or whatever it is, right? It's supposed to be scary because you want these individuals to go out and tell their friends and their associates they're not playing. They're giving out Golden State Warrior numbers, right? And you don't want to go on this side. You want to be on this side. So you really don't want to change the narrative of it. You want it to be hard and you want it to be soft at the same time, right? So we don't tell people in the community that we having to call in on purpose because of the safety of the individuals that are sitting in that room. Not the community people, but the actual participants that's sitting there, because you don't know if they're in rival gangs or what. So we don't tell people, the news don't know about it. When they find out about it, it's the next day. And everything that happened. Because I think there was one incident when I went to a call-in in Chicago, and right after the call-in, a guy shot another guy from a rival gang because somebody knew about it.
So I should have made myself clear.
Okay.
Not to tell the community when the call-in is, but to inform them of the process of the call-in and what that means for the community.
We do that in our, like Gladys puts on a Martin Luther King celebration. It's huge in South Bend. And we have breakout sessions and we talk about it at that time. My role in building this relationship, every single meeting not every single, but most, 80% of the meetings that happen in the city of South Bend, me or my staff try to participate. So that way we can keep the message going about what's taking place. We also bring in, and this is from Bishop Harris, bring in the faith leaders, because who got the biggest audience, right? So the past 2 Sundays, I've been at the Mennonite church on Sunday, speaking at the Mennonite church. And everybody like, why are you at the Mennonite church, right? Because we need them, right? Talking to the Sunni Muslim, because we need them. Just got through talking to the Jewish rabbi, because we need them. We need to build these relationships, because guess what? What is the most singlest, divisive, divided population in the United States? The church. If Jesus wasn't in the street, the lady with the issue of blood would have never got healed. But we're teaching 4 walls. So we're trying to break that norm and get you to come to the streets and touch an individual and say, you know what, I love you. And that changes everything.
Yes, I'm Roy Waterman. Thank you for inviting me, Veronica. I was not going to come. I didn't know. It's funny because I got to be on the panel because I've been a part of Ceasefire for like 4 years and change. I don't think you knew that. Here in New York. And it's funny because I'm listening to you guys talk about like how Ceasefire is working in all these other places, and I have a newsflash for you. It's not working like that in New York. I wish New York had the level of support, community support, and all of that. I do Ceasefire in Brooklyn. And it's a big push to like help young people, like show them a different route. I'm the voice of inspiration as a formerly incarcerated man who spent almost 13 years in prison. I talk to them about like decision making, making better decisions, and like also like how do you identify opportunity. The problem with the call-ins, in my personal opinion, at least here in New York, and I don't know if it's the same where you guys are at, is the heavy law enforcement presence. So in New York, you can walk into a ceasefire room and see 100 officers, and 75 of them might be white shirts. So when you want to talk about intimidation, you want to talk about like what's set as far as setting a narrative when the young people who are like challenged, if you will, come to the room. It's an intimidating, but also it's not a welcoming environment. And I've had these ongoing conversations because I got invited to the ceasefire by the deputy commissioner of the NYPD, and we have these dialogues, and I tell them, like, listen, you got to put less officers in this space. Because yes, we know that you're mandating a lot of these young people who are identified as either being in gang or being violent to be in the room. However, you set the precedence when you have the first 4 people talk about consequences, right? Because the first piece is the deputy commissioner, we want to protect you, we want to help you, we want to do this, we want to do that, right? Then the Brooklyn command officer says, this is how we do a gang takedown. He does a PowerPoint presentation of actual pictures of a gang takedown. Then you have someone from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office who says, this is how we prosecute you. Then someone from the federal FBI or the DEA says, well, if the state doesn't get you, this is how we get you. So I still like to say, like, thank you for like giving like the different ways of how you're going about it. But like I said, and the ceasefire isn't working on a level playing field everywhere, so you know. And I think it was originated in New York, if I'm not mistaken, which is or Boston. Well, yeah. So thank you.
No, good points. So same in Detroit. Law enforcement heavy. You know, every law enforcement agency is in that room, and so I would say probably about 100, maybe, right? Maybe about 100. It's deep. It's deep. Yes. But one thing I am encouraged about is before I caught my flight here yesterday, U.S. Attorney of Michigan, the mayor, and Chief Craig, right, invited past call-in individuals to have a sit down with them, have dinner with them, to find out, tell me what you thought about the call-in. What do you think we can do different? The number one thing is what you just said, right? Yes, sir. And another thing was even how the letter was delivered to invite them to the call-in. That's coming from the police. And even that conversation is just too harsh, right? And so I'm glad that they were honest and they told the truth and said, these are some things y'all got to change. I guarantee you would get a lot more buy-in. You would get, because we get about 30 guys. And I would say, I mean, on average, we may get 7 to 12 guys who may sign up. That's not good enough for me, right? But I think if we change some things and listen to what they're saying, listen to the guys that we're trying to reach, we have to listen to them. They have to have a seat at the table. So.
Okay, I'm the scaredy cat in the room. I agree. It's heavy, the law enforcement presence, but it's like, these are bad guys that don't like each other in this room. So they need to be there. Yeah. They need to be there. I think, again, Bishop Harris, I know he probably don't want me to keep mentioning his name, but I think he softens it by continuously saying, we're here for you. The law enforcement here, they're here for you. You're not going to be locked up. He tries to continuously set the tone that this, you know, it doesn't look friendly, but it is kind of thing. But
we had that challenge too with the call-ins, but they talked to me, and a lot of people forget that I was those guys, and I have an unusual favor with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department. For one, I'm hired by them, and I was the gang guy in the city for many, many years, and that was a big test. Because now you with the man, you snitch, you a CI. And what I had to do is let them know, if I'm not on this side, your behind is in trouble. So it took about a month before they stopped rapping and chopping up in the streets, and they said, hey, he's still Big Papa, he's still PG. So now I told them, pull back some of the police and bring more qualified officers that are more prepared to handle this. So what we use is the gang unit. Just the gang unit, and we may have a couple of probation officers because they're there. So our police presence is not that strong anymore, that they're more receptive. And another thing, you from Brooklyn, I'm from Brooklyn. Take my card, and whatever you need, brother, I will come and help you. Okay?
You know what? You are exactly right. The police presence is really heavy. The first time we had a call in at the Charles Martin Center, they got on the roof. And, you know, like snipers. All of that was on top of the roof. And we have a ballet school that's in one of our buildings. A prestigious Peter and the Wolf ballet school in the Nutcracker.
Right next door.
Right next door. Them people went bananas, okay? And so I told the executive director, I said, do it take all of that? And then we talk to the police force. I work in the building. If you're going to put all of that and guns and stuff like that, maybe y'all don't need to come here. Because I work there every day. I ain't scared. And if y'all scared, you need to go someplace else. Because those people on probation not coming there with guns, they not fools. We can think they might have done something bad, but they not crazy. They ain't going to come to the center with a gun, is they, Isaac? But so they had to slow that down a little bit. And then we talk to the people. I know all the community leaders, and they're on there too. They come to the call-in. And they go in the room with them, Isaac. Remember, they go in there and they talk to the people. So we welcome them. We have to balance that because they scared. They ain't listening if they're that scared. But we balance that. And then we talk about it. We talk about it. Just like you said, we go in there and we talk about it. We don't tell the police they all right. We say, no, you got to slow that stuff down here because they're not going to listen. If they come in here scared, they ain't listening at you and us either. So we had to balance that, but we did talk about it. We didn't just let it go.
I could just add one quick thing. One of the things that really works at South Bend, we're constantly changing and evolving. We have a core group that when we started GVI 6 years ago, the same group is still together. It's consistent, right? And everybody has a voice. But whatever the majority voice is what we go with. So a lot of times I got ideas and they're like, no, you know how long it took me. I had an outreach proposal sit on the table for 3 years before I finally got a chance to do it. And because of Quincy, I'll steal your stuff. I'm not going to tell you I won't steal your stuff. If I come to your city and you got best practices, I'm going to give you the credit the first time, and after that, it was my idea. Right? But because of the core group and us constantly evolving and learning and believing in each other, that's why we've been able to be successful with our call-ins. It's not because of we're trying to perfect. We want to cause help, not harm. And we realized some of the things that was going on, and so we was willing to try different stuff, you know, about having influentials in the back room while they can video it and they can see the actual call-in themselves with their people. So it's different things that we tried, and it's a couple things we tried that didn't work. We didn't do it no more, you know. So and that's what it got to be. And you got to be the voice for the individuals that's sitting in that seat.
And then you know what? The one other thing is that we had the neutral party is the community foundation. The community foundation is the person that roll out the carpet for the call-in to take place. They send out the letters and they do everything so that it's not coming from law enforcement. So it's not coming from the mayor's office. It's not coming from the prosecutor. It's coming from the community foundation because they're a neutral person.
Yeah.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions. So we have one here.
Yes, I'm from New York City. I was wondering if you had anything formal built in within GVI that would address the trauma that you yourselves experience. I'm listening to phone calls at 2 a.m, and but just what you experience.
So I always say, Quincy, I always say GVI is reactive because it's always after a shooting, or if you're really doing your reconnaissance work, you're catching it ahead of time. And it's never dealing with the victims, and nor is it dealing with the people who's actually doing the work to get to trauma care. So what I implemented with my staff and on our end of it is trauma care, because I never realized how much trauma pastors go through, right? They got to bury you, do all this stuff, right? And they take all your burdens on you until I start doing this work. And I'm sitting at home and I'm thinking about little Tony while I'm trying to watch the basketball game. Or I'm not paying attention to my wife because I'm thinking about little Tony, and I find myself, I think I'm getting older, just getting sensitive. I'm crying all the time now, right? But I realize it's because of internal trauma, you know what I'm saying? And I never unpacked the box of the old trauma that I had for myself, and then I just compounded and started putting other people's trauma on top of it. So we purposely, especially with my outreach team and my staff inside, I intentionally make sure that we're doing trauma-informed care, right? With the victim's family, with my staff, and with our participants. Because in order for them to help them get a job, they got to get all this mess out of them, and then we can build them up to be able to maintain and keep a job, or go and get their high school diploma, or go and get a hard-skilled trade. So we got the university on board with us. We implement restorative justice. ACEs, adolescent childhood education, all those type of things to try to make sure, because most communities that has this type of violence, you got PTSD. And nobody wants to admit it. You know, even if you're not involved in the shooting, but you're hearing the shootings in your neighborhood, you might as well be in Iraq. So what do we do about becoming a trauma-informed city, not just area?
That's something that we all should work on. Our hospital hired a trauma person to work in there. And we also have another group which some cities have called Mamas Against Violence. And they do grief counseling. And so we call Mamas Against Violence when we need them. So like he said, you can call all kinds of other people to help with this, not just on yourself.
So this never even crossed my mind back in 2017. Never even thought I would need self-care, right, or be concerned about that, right? 2 incidents happened. One, we were actually, me and Bishop were flying home from National Network Conference in 2017. While we were landing, we got a call of a 3-year-old shot in the head. We had to rush to the hospital, meet with the family. We went straight from the airport, bags and all, straight to the hospital. We get into the emergency room, right? They let us back, and me and Bishop are standing there. We just trying to meet the family and, you know, interact with them. The bed comes by. The doctors are rushing her by us with a bandage around her head, and she's fighting for her life, right? Seeing that, just never thought I would see anything like that. Right after that, well, I would say maybe 3-4 months later after that, we lost an outreach worker to gun violence. Not on the job, right? But old beef, back in the day, wrong place, wrong time, wrong conversation, and he lost his life. We had to take a serious look at self-care, right? Consulted with the National Network, Dr. Lori Leach. She teaches a model called social resilience. Powerful stuff. Really focusing on how to rewire your brain, right? And so we went through a whole training piece with her. How long did that last? A little over a year, yeah. Flying back and forth, conference calls, you know, and that has really, really helped us. And, you know, sometimes we have to remind each other about self-care, right? Bishop, don't go this time. You stay home, go be with your family, right? Or I have to tell some of my outreach workers, you know, hey, you sit this one out. But it really has helped us take a completely different perspective of how we're taking care of ourselves.
What we did also, like I said, I'm senior pastor. And, you know, in this work, you lose a lot of people. A lot of the guys that you help, you know, and you don't forget them, especially if you work with them for a while. So even though I'm a senior pastor and I did what Isaac said, we hired somebody to come on to talk to us, you know. And even my wife is the director of Cure Violence in Jacksonville, Florida. And what we put on with them is they have a trauma counselor every week to deal with them. I'm thinking, you know, really, when we're out there doing this work, our first clients are ourselves. You know, we got to make sure that, because, you know, we go home smiling, you deal with all of this stuff, you know. I'm reminded of a guy that I tried to help, and he got shot pretty bad with an AK-47. He had a colostomy bag. He ran to the police station ran under the jail and asked for help. And I drove him somewhere myself and drove him back, and then somebody's following me. I'm like, oh, God, you know, what did I get myself into? So when I finally got rid of him, they said, what happened? I said, well, I dropped him somewhere. Oh, we found him, you know. They got him anyway. So you think about that. What could you have done more? So as Quincy say, I concur with him and all of us. We didn't know this when we started. So now we got some catching up to do to deal with us.
We have one last question here in the back.
That was basically some of what I wanted to say, because I was wanting to ask, me being a mother who lost a child in South Bend, how do you guys deal with, how often do you all keep in contact with the mother? Because my motto once the reception is over, that's when the pain starts, and no one follow up, and everybody is not fortunate like I am. I have insurance, so I see a therapist. And after I do a call-in, I immediately make another appointment with my therapist. So the question is, how often do you all keep in contact with that mother who has lost a child?
So we had a young man by the name of Tobar. Yeah, 1 minute. I'll be quick too. Who was killed after we just got through doing a counseling session with him. And the mother, I mean, she was devastated. And to this day, I talk to her once a week via Facebook, via message, or she comes to my office. I also have somebody who's going to counsel with her and the whole family at free of charge every month since the shooting. But most times we have Bobby Woods, who's a Mamas Against Violence, Hometown, Mom Demand Action. I utilize every single organization because I cannot be everywhere. So I have to spread the work out for this to happen. And the fact that we have so many people that care in the city of South Bend really means a lot because they understand what people are going through and they just want to help. So I make sure I get some people that's going to be consistent and that's going to be trustworthy to be able to work with these families.
That was the last question. I wanted to say something to everybody in this room because coming here, I felt real good. Sitting and listening to the panel today, it made me encouraged and inspired to be in the room with people who care, people who understand, and people who get it. Because some people don't get it, and they just take all your energy because they don't get it. And if they don't get it, you can't give it to them. So I just felt encouraged just by being around people who care and who understand. It motivates me to keep on doing this work. And I say it's work, and I don't say a job. I feel like it was our work. I feel like God gave me a gift to do this work, and this is what I was born to do. And so that's why I call it my work. And I was inspired just by listening to that group today. I just felt good. Because then I ain't got to explain nothing. Y'all get it. So thank you.
If we could all give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us here today. There's a short break, and then there'll be another panel in this room, and there's other panels around the building. Thank you.